Hello and welcome to the first episode of The Sports Talk, a podcast that talks about sports updates and the different sports news and rumors around the world. I'm your host, James, and in today's episode, we will talk about the recently held World Cup 2022 group stage draw and predict who are the nations that I think are going to advance in the round of 16. And furthermore, we will discuss the ins and outs of the World Cup draw and offer you, the listeners, a time. In Group A, obviously Qatar is there since they are the host of the 2022 World Cup, along with Ecuador, Senegal, and Netherlands. I think Group A would be a straightforward group since Ecuador, I love how they performed in their qualifiers in the South American qualifiers, but I think the current Africa Cup of Nations champion, the first time winners, Senegal, has improved much greater than Ecuador, and I think that is enough to edge out Ecuador of the knockout stage. And the way that Senegal performed during their qualifiers is amazing, and how much they have grown into this group of football players compared to the last World Cup wherein they performed abysmal, or should I say they performed not abysmal, but I think they performed under the radar compared to what was expected out of them during the start of the competition. And the next one, I think the no-brainer leader of the group after all of the matches would be Netherlands. Netherlands have a rejuvenated young core in Matthijs de Ligt and Frank de Jong, and under the guidance and leadership of Louis van Gaal. And I think that is enough to easily outplay every match that they are going to play in Group A. Now, let's talk about Group B. In Group B, we have England, Iran, USA, and a mystery team between Ukraine versus Scotland, and eventually will face Wales in the qualifications. And I think that if Wales win in the qualification rounds for the final qualification places in the World Cup, I think they are going to be there along with the USA in terms of getting the second place compared to England, who is far more superior in terms of star power, as they have the likes of Harry Kane, Rashford, Bukayo Saka, and all the young guns that I think would help spice things up in their golden generation. And right now, I think seeing this group, if Wales underperformed and if Wales win in their qualification matches against either Ukraine or Scotland, I think USA will be challenged in terms of battling for the second place. And if Scotland goes all the way through, then I think they are going to give USA a headache in getting the second place. or even Ukraine, since they are performing really, really well to get the qualification places, to qualify for a match for the qualification places in the World Cup. But I think in Group D, I see England clear top favorites, top over their opponents, and the second one is USA, since they had a great run of form lately. So now, let's talk about Group C. This group is a tricky one since we have Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and Poland. Poland, we know that they have Lewandowski and other complementary football players that help Lewandowski and Polish national team to rise up to the occasion, as we've seen in the 2018 World Cup. And Mexico, as we've seen it too, they can rise up to the occasion, like in the 2018 World Cup where they've beaten Germany in a surprising manner. And I think Argentina is the same Argentina, especially with the likes of Messi and Dybala and all that, Lotario Martinez. And I think since this is a tricky group, if Mexico turns up during the first game or so, or the first two games, then I think that they have a great chance in qualifying, even atop of this group. But then, if we see, a great form of run for Argentina, then we may see them top of this group. That is why I think this is a tricky group, since Poland, Argentina, and Mexico can qualify when they turn it up in this competition. And I think my final prediction for this group would be Argentina top and Poland, while Mexico is sitting closely at the bottom of Poland. Maybe a point or two or a goal difference. Who knows? They might show up, or any team can show up in this group, and it'll be an interesting one. So that's it for Group C. Now that we're done in Group C, we're going to tackle Group D, in which it has France, Denmark, Tunisia, and you guessed it right, the final place would be decided by the Interconfederation playoffs between Australia and the UAE. Sorry, not UAE, or the United Arab Emirates, and the winner of that will face Peru in the finals, and whoever wins, they are going to qualify and take the place in Group D. So I think, off the bat, France would be at the top, since they have, looking at the team on paper, they have Mbappe, Pogba, and Griezmann. Although, those guys sometimes have a dip in form before the World Cup, and they just took off in the World Cup. So yeah, just like in 2018. But sorry for that, a helicopter just passed by. And the second one is going to be tricky, since it's between Denmark or the winner of Australia, UAE, and Peru. And I think if Australia wins, they would challenge Denmark heavily. But let us remember that in the Euro 2020, Denmark had an amazing cup run, in which saw them, I think, in the Final Four or the round of 16. And that would be a confidence boost for them. And it might carry that form might carry up until the World Cup, in which we would see them be in the knockout stage again. And up next, we are going to have Group E. Many considered it as going to be the group of death because look at the nations in Group E. You have Spain, Germany, Japan, and the final spot would be New Zealand and Costa Rica. I think Costa Rica can edge out New Zealand, so if Costa Rica wins, it would be really a group of death. Because, or even New Zealand, if they can win, it'll still be a group of death. And I agree with many critics saying that Group E would be the group of death of this 2022 World Cup. Because we must remember that the top two of each group will only qualify, and not the third or the fourth one. So I think if Spain delivers another World Cup performance, just like in the knockout stage in 2018, in which, I think, they performed subparly, but they survived. And I think if they performed really, really well, they can be second. And looking at Germany is a really tough team to call out because on paper they have the best young talents and the seasoned veteran talents in Thomas Müller and the likes, while they have young talents such as Leroy Sané and the likes of German youth players. And looking at Japan, they have performed very, very well in every World Cup that they play. Last year in 2018, they were the last Asian nation to be eliminated in the hands of Belgium in that classical match. And I think that this would be really a group of death. And in my prediction, it'll be Germany at top, Spain or Japan in second, while Costa Rica will be on the fourth one. So it is really a tough group to call. So the next group would be Group F. We have Belgium, Canada, Morocco, and Croatia. Well, Belgium is performing really, really well. I think this is the golden age of the German football team. Belgian football team rather. Was in 2018, in which they earned third place, beating England in a good fashion and producing classic matches with Japan and Brazil during the 2018 World Cup. But I think this would be the last chance of their golden generation to even win a World Cup. Because their golden generation is getting old. The likes of Eden Hazard. I don't know if Eden Hazard will even play. Thorgan, Thibaut Courtois, and Kevin De Bruyne and the likes. Their golden generation is getting older. And I think that this would be the last time they have a true chance to win a World Cup. And this would be also a good chance to look at the Canadian team, in which we have Alphonso Davies, but the Canadian team is really tough to call because the team does not revolve around one player only. They have talents in the midfield, strikers, and the defense. And I think that they've earned their right in Group F, or in the World Cup rather. And I think they would challenge for the second place of this group between Croatia. So my prediction would be Belgium at top, Canada at second, Croatia on third, and Morocco on fourth. Now that we are done with groups D, E, and F, we will now move to Group G, in which it features Brazil, Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon. I think Brazil would come out of this group atop, since based on how they performed in their qualifications and other friendly matches. And I think the second one is going to be tricky between Cameroon and Serbia. Serbia has been really performing well. They had a great run of form lately, and I think it may carry over to the World Cup 2022 this coming December or November, I think, in late November rather. So I think the final placings for this group would be Brazil, Serbia, Cameroon, and Switzerland. But I think the top three teams between Serbia, Switzerland, and Cameroon would have uh, least amount of difference in terms of points. And I think that will be the factor. That's why I'm choosing Serbia over the other teams to qualify along with Brazil in this group. And the final group of this 2022 World Cup would be Portugal, Ghana, Uruguay, and South Korea. In Group H, I think Uruguay would be the top team to beat, with Portugal being lurking in their background. And I think Uruguay have to be the first in this group, because looking back on how they performed during the qualifiers to get in this final stage of the Qatar 2022 FIFA World Cup, they performed excellently. And I think it may carry over to the 2022 World Cup. And I think that along with Portugal, they're going to qualify. So my final prediction in this World Cup draw in Group H would be Uruguay at first, Portugal at second, and Ghana and South Korea. So that is the end of our predictions for the upcoming 2022 World Cup, and that signals the end also for our very first episode of our podcast, in which we tackled and predicted the 2022 World Cup. And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I did creating this very, very first episode of this podcast. And I hope to see you, or I hope to see you again next time in this growing podcast of sports.